New York never slept. The pulse of neon, the clamor of subways, the eternal drone of yellow cabs and honking horns, these things stitched together the endless rhythm of the city. But on that particular summer night, beneath a haze of humidity that clung to every building and soul, the rhythm faltered. Something ancient had stirred, and New York was about to learn what it meant to be prey. It began at the harbor, though no one living that night survived long enough to testify. Security cameras later recovered from the Port Authority showed grainy, distorted footage, a cargo vessel adrift, its crew nowhere to be found. The ship had left Brazil, carrying lumber, fruit, and livestock. Somewhere in the shadows of the hold, a creature had waited, fed, and grown. By the time it reached New York, it was no mere animal. It was hunger incarnate. The camera captured the first sign. A shape unfurling against the steel hull. The slither of something impossibly vast, scales catching the light like green-black armor. And then, a head, broad as a truck, eyes gleaming yellow as molten sulfur. The python, though python hardly described the scale, rose from the ship like a living skyscraper, tongue flicking through the night air. Then the camera fizzled into static. At 1:13 a.m., the 911 dispatch center began receiving calls. A dock worker screaming about, a snake the size of Manhattan Bridge. Another caller, her voice trembling, reported, something moving between the cranes. Then, silence. Units were dispatched, but the responders found only mangled vehicles, twisted steel, and a trail of crushed pavement that led inland. By dawn, the city stirred awake to chaos. Helicopters hovered over the East River, their footage broadcast across every channel in America. Anchors stammered as the screens behind them showed the impossible. A serpent, coiled around Pier 36, its body thicker than subway tunnels, sliding between warehouses like a liquid wall of muscle. Its head lifted stories high, smashing down cranes as if they were toys. Seagulls scattered, dwarfed to insects against its bulk. New Yorkers, half-dressed and still groggy with sleep, flooded the streets, staring at their phones in disbelief. The governor declared a state of emergency before noon. NYPD cordoned off Lower Manhattan, while the National Guard moved tanks into position. Fighter jets streaked overhead, their sonic booms echoing between skyscrapers. But the python had already begun its march into the heart of the city. It moved with terrifying inevitability, not fast but unstoppable, its coils sweeping across avenues, flattening cars and tearing up asphalt. It crushed entire blocks without malice or intention, it was simply moving, and nothing could stand in its way. Its hiss rattled windows. Its eyes glared into high rises, forcing thousands of tenants to evacuate in blind panic. By midday, Wall Street was abandoned. The giant python slithered through the canyons of finance, scattering papers and debris into the wind. The stock exchange bell rang out that morning, but there was no one left to hear it. Instead, the ringing was drowned beneath the roar of collapsing structures as the python wrapped itself around buildings, squeezing until glass shattered and concrete groaned. New York was under siege. The military struck first. Tanks rolled down Broadway, their barrels swiveling to track the serpent's head. Rockets fired, explosions cracked, and smoke bloomed across the skyline. For a moment, the world held its breath, watching live broadcasts, hoping the nightmare could be ended with brute force. But when the dust cleared, the python emerged, wounded but alive. Its scales were scarred, blackened by fire, yet the missiles had barely penetrated. It reared back and struck, with a speed that defied its size. A single sweep of its body crushed an entire armored convoy, tanks folding like soda cans. Soldiers fled, scattering beneath the monster's coils, swallowed by shadow and dust. The jets attacked next, diving low over the city, missiles streaking toward their target. Skyscrapers shuddered as explosions shook the air. Windows imploded for blocks. But again, the python endured. Its body coiled around the Woolworth building, dragging it down in a roaring avalanche of stone and steel. The creature's roar, if one could call the guttural, thunderous hiss that erupted from its maw roar, rolled across the boroughs like a storm surge. New Yorkers ran, bridges clogged with panicked humanity. Subways overflowed until trains became death traps, suffocating and desperate. Ferries across the Hudson capsized under the weight of frantic passengers. The great metropolis, bastion of civilization, became a hive of terror. And all the while, the python pressed deeper into the city, its endless coils winding through streets like rivers of flesh. Amid the chaos, a handful of people sought answers, not just escape. Dr. Evelyn Klein, her hair gray but her posture unyielding, was a herpetologist who had studied serpents for 4 decades. She stood at a temporary command center set up near Central Park, surrounded by frantic officials and military brass. Her hands shook as she reviewed satellite images of the creature. "This isn't possible," she murmured, though her voice carried authority. "No python can grow to this size. Not naturally. Then what the hell are we dealing with?" demanded General Harper, his uniform streaked with soot. "We've thrown everything we've got at it. Missiles, tanks, jets, it just keeps coming." Evelyn swallowed, staring at the grainy image of the beast. Legends speak of serpents worshipped as gods in the Amazon. Entities tied to rivers, fertility, destruction. I thought they were myths. But if something ancient was disturbed, something that fed unchecked for centuries in isolation, she shook her head. Then this city is facing not an animal, but a force of nature. The general slammed his fist onto the table. "Myth or not, it bleeds. That means it can die." "Not by your weapons," Evelyn countered. "If you keep firing in the middle of Manhattan, you'll destroy the city faster than the python will." A tense silence fell. The general's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Behind them, monitors showed live feeds. The serpent scaling the Chrysler building, its coils draped over the Art Deco crown-like grotesque ornamentation. New York was being remade in its image. The exodus reached a fever pitch by evening. Manhattan became a skeleton of burning cars, toppled cranes, and abandoned belongings. The Brooklyn Bridge collapsed under the weight of terrified crowds, sending hundreds plunging into the East River. Fires burned unchecked across entire blocks. Sirens wailed until they fell silent, one by one. And still, the python fed. It swallowed buses whole, its jaws dislocating with horrifying precision. It devoured anything that moved, livestock from zoos, fleeing dogs, even entire groups of people swept up in its coils. Its hunger seemed endless, its presence like a curse spreading through every burrow. Yet the people of New York, stubborn to their core, refused to surrender completely. Firefighters formed human chains to evacuate hospitals. Priests opened cathedrals for shelter. Strangers lifted rubble together, dug with bare hands to free the trapped. Even as the monster loomed, New York clung to life. The battle for Central Park marked the turning point. Military strategists lured the serpent into the open expanse, away from skyscrapers. Dozens of helicopters circled, drawing its attention with spotlights and flares. Ground troops, armed with experimental high-yield charges, prepared to strike. At first, the plan seemed to work. The python slithered into the park, its body flattening trees and fountains, tearing through the greenery. Soldiers opened fire with concentrated precision, targeting eyes, mouth, and underbelly. Explosions rocked the night, and for the first time, the creature recoiled in pain, blood spraying like rivers across the grass. Cheers erupted. The monster could be hurt. Hope flickered. Then it struck back. Its tail whipped through the park like a hurricane, toppling helicopters from the sky. Soldiers vanished beneath its bulk, crushed into the soil. The creature coiled around Belvedere Castle and dragged it into ruins. Fires ignited the park, the trees turning into pillars of flame. The battlefield dissolved into a nightmare. Dr. Evelyn, watching from a command post, shouted over the chaos, "You're only making it stronger. It thrives on conflict." But her warnings went unheard. The attack faltered, and Central Park became a graveyard of steel, smoke, and shattered bodies. By the third day, New York was unrecognizable. The skyline was broken, entire districts leveled. The serpent had coiled itself around Midtown, its body encircling blocks like a living wall. The city was its lair now. The government evacuated what survivors they could, establishing refugee camps across New Jersey and upstate. Global news outlets broadcast the siege endlessly. Riots erupted in other cities as fear spread. If such a creature could exist in New York, what else might lurk unseen? Conspiracy theorists proclaimed the end of days. Religious leaders called it divine punishment. Scientists argued on air, their voices drowned out by the horror of the images. The serpent rearing above Times Square, its hiss drowning out the silence of a city brought to its knees. And yet, Evelyn Klein refused to give up. Poring over ancient texts and records, she uncovered stories of giant serpents slain not by force, but by cunning. Myths told of warriors luring them into traps, cutting off their air, severing their link to the rivers they claimed as their own. If this thing came from the Amazon, she said to the weary general, then it is bound to water. Starve it of that, and it will weaken. The general's eyes narrowed. You want to dry out Manhattan. I want to cut the serpent off from the rivers. Flood barriers, tunnels, sewers, seal them all. Then we lure it into the open, where it can't retreat. It was a desperate plan, but desperation was all New York had left. The final stand came on the fifth night. Engineers detonated explosives to collapse the sewer networks and floodgates. Pumps diverted the Hudson away from lower Manhattan. For the first time since its arrival, the Python seemed restless, its movements sluggish, its coils thrashing as if confused. Flares lit the sky as the military unleashed its last gambit. Drones swarmed, baiting the serpent toward Times Square. The creature followed, its vast body grinding across the ruins of Broadway. Its head rose high above the flashing billboards, eyes glowing like suns, tongue flicking at the acrid air. Then the trap was sprung. Explosives buried deep beneath the asphalt detonated, collapsing the ground beneath the python. Its massive body plunged into the crater, thrashing violently. Tanks and helicopters unleashed a torrent of fire, concentrated on its head and throat. The serpent writhed, its hiss echoing like thunder, but the lack of water had weakened it. For the first time, the monster faltered. Dr. Evelyn, standing amidst the chaos, whispered as though to herself, breathe your last. The serpent shuddered. Its head slammed into the ruins of one Times Square, shattering the structure. Blood poured like a river, flooding the crater. And with one final convulsion, the python collapsed, its body settling into silence. The city, trembling and broken, exhaled. When the sun rose, New York was a grave. Smoke curled from shattered towers. The serpent's corpse sprawled across blocks, its coils coiled around ruins like grotesque monuments. Survivors emerged slowly, blinking at the daylight, their faces gaunt but alive. They gathered in silence, staring at the fallen monster. News spread across the world. The giant python was dead. But the victory felt hollow. Tens of thousands were gone. The city's heart was shattered. Manhattan, once the symbol of human ambition, had become a scar on the earth. Dr. Evelyn stood at the edge of the crater, her eyes on the beast. Reporters swarmed, asking her how it had come to be, if more like it might exist. She gave no easy answers. Nature holds secrets we've yet to understand, she said. What we call myths may only be truths we've ignored. Today, New York faced one of those truths. And it nearly destroyed us. The general approached, his uniform torn, his face lined with exhaustion. Do you think we've seen the last of them? Evelyn's gaze lingered on the horizon, on the rivers beyond. I think we've woken something. And the world will never sleep as soundly again. The city would rebuild, New York always did. But the scars of those days lingered. A monument was raised in Central Park, not just for the victims, but as a reminder of the siege. A bronze serpent coiled around a fractured skyline, its eyes cast toward the sky, a warning to generations to come. Because New York had survived. Barely. But survival came with a truth carved into the bones of its people: the world was not theirs alone. In the shadows of rivers and forests, in the myths whispered by forgotten tribes, other forces waited. And one day, they might rise again.